We don't know where we're going with Zane and how to support him and what to do to help his future.
We can run away or we can fight. And some children with autism are fighting for their lives.
In this film, I want to explore how growing children are affected by the common developmental disorder, autism, through the eyes of children and families affected by it.
And there's just absolutely no emotion whatsoever, and she's just staring right at you.
This is exactly what makes these studies so powerful, that it's sort of this natural history of the child that we're following.
To see what they can tell us about how our brains process all the information from the world around us. We are all social animals. In our hectic, busy world, we need to share, negotiate and cooperate, make and keep appointments, control our desires and respond to familiar and unfamiliar people. If we didn't, there'd be chaos. Our brains are constantly monitoring the social situations that we find ourselves in, attempting to mind-read the people around us and to help us to respond appropriately. These social skills are partly hardwired from birth and partly learnt in childhood, and they are absolutely crucial to the world in which we live. But there is a group of people for whom social interaction is not necessarily hardwired from birth or easily learnt in childhood, and for some remains completely absent. Tony Miller was diagnosed with severe autism at the age of 15 months. He is now 15 and lives at home with his mother, Lainey. I mean, perhaps it's best to take it right back to the beginning, you know, and for you to tell me a little bit about how he was as a baby. I mean, when did you start to notice that maybe his development wasn't progressing in the way you expected?
Well, Tony was my third child, and very traumatic birth, long labour. Roughly around about the 7-8 month mark, I knew that something wasn't quite developing. He would interact, he would smile and play as a baby would, but if you gave him toys, whereas a baby will explore, Tony didn't. Mm-hmm. He would just look at them, and I was having to put his hand on and show him what to do.
As a child psychologist, I use key developmental milestones in order to judge any baby's progress in its language, physical development, and social and emotional behaviour. A first warning sign for autism can be when children like Tony fail to reach some of these key milestones. A crucial one is when a baby makes eye contact with its mother, an early sign of typical socialisation.
Around about the 12, 13, 14 month mark, I lost the eye contact. And it seemed to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. I was feeding him breakfast one morning and he was looking everywhere but at me.
And it had gone.
It had gone. We had all of the baby things, but sort of from the 6 month on, I started to lose bit by bit.
And you found yourself having to... This is quite ordinary?
This is ordinary. This is every day.
You're not moving.
No, I don't react. I tune out.
Autism is a lifelong condition affecting how the brain processes information. It's now thought to affect at least 1% of children in the UK. 4 times as many boys as girls are diagnosed with autism. Its causes are not fully understood. Numerous studies suggest that genes play a significant part, but environmental factors seem to play a role too. Symptoms fall into 3 main clusters: problems with social interaction, with communication, and repetitive activities and interests. How would you explain what autism is?
Autism is a disability, a developmental disability that affects the way a person thinks, communicates, and interacts with people. And Tony suffers on the severe end of all of that. So how Tony thinks and how we think, how he sees his perception of the world is totally, totally different to what you and I would see. And his interaction is only on his terms.
At the age of 5, when most children are expected to be almost fluent in their speech, Tony had almost no spoken words. Another warning sign for autism. He still has little spoken language, so Lainey has had to learn a new way to communicate with her son.
He's given a picture of a juice, and you have the juice there, so it's getting him to focus, and he gives you the picture and you give him the juice. So he understands, if I give you that, then I get that. And then you advance that to biscuits, you advance that to toys, you advance that to food. And eventually, you know, what I would do with Tony is go, I want juice, I want, say it, say it, say it, juice, juice. And so that symbol could then be removed, and he would then be saying the word juice as he does now.
He'd put the words in, he'd use his language, which is what you're ultimately looking for, isn't it? That exchange of words.
That's it.
Can I just ask about the feelings?
Yeah.
Because how do you use those?
When he has a meltdown, you know, I will say, Tony, tell me what you're feeling. And he'll tell me angry, and then I'll say, what's made you angry? What's made you angry? But if we're out in the community and he starts to get upset, you know, and he can't say it's because there's too many people, Mum.
At its most severe, autism can cause an extreme form of social isolation. Today, Tony spends most of his waking hours sat in front of his computer, apparently oblivious to the people around him.
When he was little, he didn't like to be cuddled, and I thought, no, I'm not having this. So I'd start off by tickling him and playing with him in a rough and tumble and throwing him about, as you do with children, and said, you know what, that's fun. So we did that. So now I have taught him, I had to teach him something that is so natural. I want to hug you, Mum, but it took years to get there.
Behavioural observations have always played an important role in autism research. Now technology is allowing scientists to investigate the link between these unusual behaviours and processes in the brain. Psychologists at the University of Nottingham are trying to uncover why people like Tony appear to be so socially isolated. They want to understand how our brains work when confronted with social situations, how we understand the social cues we encounter every day.
We're interested in two particular brain systems. So if we look on the side in intraparietal sulcus, that's an area which we know from many studies it responds when you see another person picking up objects, interacting with objects. That responded exactly the same in the typical and the autistic participants. But on the inside of the brain, there's a region at the front called medial prefrontal cortex, which, again, we know from other studies is much more involved in social interaction and understanding other people's beliefs, desires, motivations, and that region was the one that was showing different responses between the typical and the autistic participants.
One of the tests they are using to help spot these differences involves both autistic and typical people viewing some short films whilst their eye movements are monitored to assess how they predict the actions they are watching.
So what we're interested in is whether your eyes are able to predict these unusual actions.
The study is still underway, but initial results suggest that people with autism tend not to look to the face for information to help them predict actions. OK, and so you've got my results?
I have got your results. Would you like to have a look?
This latest eye-tracking technology is starting to give us real insight into how everyday social interactions rely on the processing of subtle cues by our brains. In terms of brain function, does it seem that people with autism are having to call on sort of different resources to help them really understand and sort of be in the world?
It's much harder work to deal with any kind of social situation when you're not picking up the social cues. And the thing that my research is particularly interested in is these non-verbal behaviours, the unconscious things that people just don't realise are going on all of the time.
Autistic spectrum disorder, ASD as it's known, encompasses a range of severity and symptoms. Tony has severe difficulties with social interaction, with communication and repetitive behaviours. He also has severe learning difficulties.
All the time.
So what's What's she telling us at the moment?
What he's doing there is repeating videos because he watches Disney videos. It could be Winnie the Pooh, it's Barney, it's Gummy Bears, it's Sailor Moon, it's all Disney. It's he's repeating, he's reacting what he sees on the videos, and he'll get up and do all the dancing like the Barney does and the Teletubbies and whatever it is watching. He'll act it out.
He's really in his own world.
Constantly. Yep. And he's oblivious. He's happy, he's playing, he's noisy.
One explanation for Tony's unusual interests is that his brain processes information very differently to mine. His narrow range of repetitive activities could be because he struggles with the unpredictability of everyday life, and especially anything that alters his routine.
We know, because our imagination tells us, I know I'm going to get up and have breakfast and I know what's going to happen to my day. He has to be reassured because he doesn't know all what's going to happen. Sometimes, it's unpredictable. If we can let them know this is what's going to happen to your day, this is what's going to happen to your life, your world, this is what we need to do to prepare you, it's the knowing.
Good. It's good.
Children with autism's dislike of change in any aspect of their lives can include their diet. At the moment, the only food that Tony will eat is a particular type of pizza.
As a baby, I fed him everything, like he ate. And as they get older, it's, I don't like cabbage, I don't like broccoli, and they can tell you, and you can encourage. Tony couldn't communicate that, he would just refuse.
When Tony was a child, any trip outside the home was almost impossible, even to the supermarket. Any change in his routine would distress him. But after a lot of careful work, Lainey has now accustomed Tony to the regular family shopping trip.
Today, what are we doing today? We do some shopping? Do some shopping? OK, put those in the trolley for Mummy. Good boy, put them in the trolley. Well done. Waiting, good boy. Come this side. I like to keep him on this side so I can make sure he's OK. Good boy.
And he links up with you very well, so there's something about having him right there.
Yes, I need to keep him close because he can start to bounce around and he can be quite frightening for little children. And also, if he's going to go into a meltdown, I don't want him attacking members of the public, which he has done. And that could be quite difficult. Yeah.
You've been bringing him here for a number of years now.
Yes, yeah.
So he knows the routine, knows the drill.
Yeah, I have to really time it carefully what time I bring him. Normally I would bring him about 8 o'clock in the morning. Right. Really quiet. Yeah. Sometimes we've been here at 6:30. Tony, can I have some Pepsi, please? This, help Mummy. Very heavy. OK, put it in. Trolley. No awareness.
Yogurts. Typical brains process and integrate the information we receive from all our senses to enable us to organise, prioritise and understand what is going on around us. But many people like Tony have difficulty doing this. So for him, everyday life can be a confusing, frightening series of places, sights and sounds.
He's quite... Yeah, give me my computer. Yogurts. Give Tony some yogurts.
Just a bit noisy here.
Yeah.
The fridges.
Yeah. This is where he will struggle here. It's the noise level. Tony, you want to pick some yogurt?
Tony suffers from hypersensitivity to noise and other sensory experiences. So for him, even the hum of a supermarket fridge can be overwhelming.
Put them in. Well done.
But that very slight change in the noise really did affect him. Just coming around that corner, didn't it?
You could see it. You could see the going for his hands covering up. His sensory overload is huge, and he really struggles with it at times. So, nearly finished, Tony. He's telling me waiting, which tells me that's a signal that, I'm coping, Mum, but not for much longer.
Don't push it for much longer.
Not for much longer.
At the University of Cardiff School of Psychology, scientists are in the middle of a 2-year study using the latest neuroimaging technology to uncover how the brain processes sensory information and why the brains of people with autism do this differently. Using a state-of-the-art brain scanner, they are recording the magnetic fields produced by the brain activity of both typical people and people with autism when they are given different sorts of sensations.
So we're recording 275 separate traces of what's going on in John's brain. What we do is that we give a certain number of these stimuli, and then at the end, John of course will come out. We'll continue testing him in different ways down in the MR, but we'll take all this data, and because we know exactly whenever John got those vibrations, we can reconstruct how his brain responded. The big response that you get from the area in the brain called the somatosensory cortex, which is the first area that picks up essentially you being touched out there, happens in about 70 milliseconds. And we build up essentially a group response between our autistic group and our neurotypical group. We try and look for differences in that. We're really interested in trying to get a better handle on the neurobiology. In other words, the brain correlates of what's going wrong with these sensory symptoms in autism. For some people it might be loud sounds, for other people it might be bright lights.
More and more parents are reporting that actually these are the symptoms that they first notice with their children, that actually there's a bit of an overload of sensory information.
That's right. If you have the bad communicative problems that we see in ASD, the problem is to actually explain why they're responding, because we don't actually know, or we don't have access to other people's internal states. I've got no idea really how you're feeling when you're looking at all this. We assume that we feel the same. This isn't particularly anxiety generating for us. But you can imagine if you go into a place where it has all these triggers for a person on the spectrum, it's going to be a horrific experience.
One thing that parents do bring is the question about there's something, wrong with their child. And actually, lots of young children who do have an ASD presentation, they're experiencing the world very differently to you and I. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
No, I would completely agree. I mean, you've really hit the nail on the head. It's the difference that we need to get across. But it's also a feeling of understanding. It's to try and get across that the reason that that person is freaking out or going crazy in the supermarket is not because they have problems that are behavioural in origin, or more than that, they're just badly behaved. They are reacting in a profoundly different way to those stimuli than we do.
So one explanation for Tony's different behaviour could be that the constant noises and repetitive movements he makes are his attempt to block out all the heightened sensations of our world and replace them with his own. It could be his way to deal with stress and uncertainty.
Tony, hold Mummy's trolley, please. Thank you. Good. We're going to get Tony some juice. Get his favourite cranberry juice. His cranberry juice. Oh, this is heavy. Mummy, do that one. OK.
Tony Miller is now 15. Like any teenager, he is also going through puberty, with all the usual hormonal changes.
He's actually getting to be quite stroppy, but along comes with the stroppiness comes he has no boundaries. He doesn't understand these emotions. My other two children, if we'd have had a disagreement, as most teenagers would walk out, slam the door and go to bedroom. Bye, see you, you'll get over it. But Tony, it's completely different. The meltdown comes because he doesn't understand these emotions. And in between all of that, he's 15, you've got the voice breaking, you can't explain to him the voice is going to break. And all as well, there's the sexuality bit comes into it as well.
You're going to put it... Thank you. Carefully with the... He has a routine each evening?
Yes. Same routine every evening. He comes in from school and the computer's the first thing that goes on.
And then bed?
Bed at 9, 9 to 15:15. And that's because I'm basically worn out by then, because most 15-year-olds don't go to bed at 9:15. But you cannot tolerate... If I have this all the time, I won't hear the TV and we don't get any time out.
Is bed sleep?
Bed, he goes into bed. It's took many years to get him into a lovely routine. If we're really lucky, he may sleep till 6 or 7, but that is a one-off and it doesn't happen that often.
Tony will always have autism, and in his case, he will always need full-time care. For the last 15 years, Lainey has looked after him almost single-handedly. At times, it is a 24-hour-a-day job. She now feels she may have to consider Tony moving into full-time residential care.
Tony's always been a biter, okay, and it's well documented. He's bit many school staff, children and support workers. You know, when he becomes frustrated, as long as you can keep the anxiety levels low and nothing upsets the routine, we can keep behaviour down. It doesn't, I mean, the potential and the risk is always there.
I love you, don't I? Jeez.
The autistic spectrum encompasses a wide range of symptoms and severity. In a different area of the spectrum are people with well-developed cognitive and language skills, but who can still struggle with the complexities of social situations. Michael Barton is 19 and a second-year physics student at the University of Surrey.
Well, I think university has been particularly good for me because it's allowed me to focus on all of my strengths. At GCSE, I particularly know English was difficult, an example of which I was given an exam paper and a question was to discuss the humour in this passage. Obviously, I didn't find it funny, so I wrote, "There isn't any."
Right.
Well, now I know that that's not the correct answer and I should have written a 5-page essay or something.
Because of Michael's autism, when he's confronted with social information, his brain works differently to mine. He struggles in social situations to understand other people's thoughts, feelings and emotions.
I suppose what's really interesting to me is to think about what the differences might be between you and I. You know, how you see the world compared to me. Can you explain a little bit of that to me?
Well, people on the autistic spectrum tend to think very logically and analytically about things, and I like to think of things in black and white, as the saying goes. And I think it's a saying because I'm not actually colourblind.
Yeah, definitely a saying.
Yeah.
And what does that mean, sort of logically? Can you give me some examples?
Well, a good example is the fact that I study physics because I have a very mathematical mind and I'm very good at mental addition, for example, but I struggled at English GCSE and I found it very difficult to socialise with people when I was younger.
At the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College London, Dr. Francesca Happe is an expert on people with autism.
Saying hello, letting him in.
So one of the things that autism is really teaching us is that social intelligence, if you want to call it that, and intellectual ability are very different things. And you can have an individual who's absolutely brilliant in terms of their intellect, in terms of their ability to understand the non-social world, but socially it's so handicapped, so limited, and has to, as you say, work so hard to manage even a little bit of neurotypical life. It's as if you were living in a completely different country where you don't speak the language and all the time you're struggling to read the signs, to know how you should behave, to try and interpret what people are saying.
To better understand how differently Michael might process a typical social situation, I wanted to try my own experiment. I love art, and in particular, portraiture. As a psychologist, I am fascinated how an artist can capture someone's character in a painting, to convey the story of their lives in an instant. I wanted to show Michael my favourite painting and see how it affected him, if he saw the same things as I did.
I couldn't quite believe the face. You know, this little girl that was looking out at me. I suppose the fact that I'm working so often with children and their families, I'm always looking for the emotional content in whatever the situation is. But I think that's something that speaks to me in the eyes and the way that she's looking at me, because that's what most people are like. We're sociable beings. And even though she's standing there on her own, it feels like you could strike up a conversation with her and that her emotions would become more obvious.
Well, obviously, I see the girl just staring at us. I think it's quite a prominent, blank kind of stare. And there's just absolutely no emotion whatsoever, and she's just staring right at you.
Any thoughts that she might have? I mean, does it say anything to you in that sense?
No, really. It just seems like a blank face just looking at me.
I found Michael's reaction to the painting quite interesting, that actually he wasn't drawn in the same way as I was to the face to find something that spoke to me. I think that, you know, most people do try and put a story to whatever they're seeing or whatever they're doing. They're trying to make it make sense to them. So to not have that, to have the absence of that, is quite a curious thing for me, because it's not the way in which I ever think. You know, I'm always thinking about what might be in somebody else's mind.
Michael doesn't seek complicated motivations or intentions the way I do. He can't read the emotions that might be conveyed by the girl in the painting. His brain processes that social information differently. Difficulty understanding other people's minds might also explain why people with autism struggle with the complexities of the English language. Michael has just published a book to explain idioms and metaphors to other people with autism.
Here we have my book. It's Raining Cats and Dogs, written and illustrated by me. And I think we'll go for this first example. It's Raining Cats and Dogs, which is an example of a classic idiom. You cannot possibly get any meaning from the actual expression itself.
Have you got a favourite?
Well, I like quite a few of them, but I particularly like this one, "You're pulling my leg." Because obviously, when you say "you're pulling my leg," you're joking about something. However, this wasn't how I thought of it, and I thought, well, I wouldn't really want someone to be pulling my leg if they were joking about something.
Yes, it wouldn't feel like a joke.
No.
But how important was it to sort of do that translation visually, you know, to put something down?
I think it was extremely important because most people on the spectrum are visual learners, and therefore they can use the picture to help interpret the phrase. I think when talking to people on the spectrum, it's very important to say exactly what you mean so that they understand it. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it can make a huge difference.
I know it sounds to me as if you've got quite a sort of positive take on, you know, the sort of person that you are.
Well, I've always thought that having a diagnosis was a positive thing. I've always been encouraged to go out there and do something about my weaknesses so that they may even become my strengths someday. And as I've shown with my book, I'm an international author at the age of 19, despite really struggling with my English GCSE. I bet my English teacher would never have dreamed of that.
Well.
So far, we've met people from different areas of the spectrum. Both have wildly different symptoms, but share common features. For instance, that their brains process social information differently. Although autism is incurable, there are many therapies that can help, and it is likely the earlier the intervention, the better. As autism cannot yet be diagnosed by a biological test, diagnosis is a complex and protracted process of behavioural observation. On the surface, a child may appear to be acting like any other, so often has to be observed over a number of months, years even, before a reliable assessment can be made. For families, this can be a very traumatic process. Mandy and Jason Clark in Leicester have 2 sons, Jake, aged 6, and Zane, aged 4.5.
Recently.
Jake was diagnosed with autism at age 3.
You're tickling him. Take me back a little bit. Take me back to the beginning with Jake. What are your earliest memories of him as a baby?
14, 15 months, it was really clear. Because at first he would point at things but say, dat, not build the sentence on words, he'd dat. But then things quite rapidly, he progressed, didn't he? He wouldn't sleep in his own room. We thought maybe the shadows from toys, you put little night lights there and all the typical things, the singing, changing bottoms, nothing worked in that. He would just scream, scream, scream and not sleep. And I mean not sleep. He'd doze through the night.
Almost.
Yes.
Right.
And that was the biggest thing, knowing something could be affecting his behaviour in the day. So that's why we didn't do anything, take him to the GP, for instance, because we thought, well, maybe that's affecting why he doesn't want to go out, doesn't want to do anything.
So you were trying to make sense of his behaviour. So he wasn't sleeping very well at night, and that might explain his behaviour during the day. But it sounds as if he was a boy who was communicating in his own way, and initially that didn't alert you to feeling concerned?
No, I thought he was just different, doing things differently. You know, you can't compare each child you've had, no, because they're all individual, so we thought maybe he's just doing things his own way.
What are you doing? Jake, that's inappropriate, sweetheart, isn't it?
Unlike Tony Miller, Jake is in a mainstream primary school. His form of autism means he can function in general society, but it is a huge strain on both him and his family.
Think of a child with autism in a mainstream school and the teacher's saying, John, look at me when I'm talking to you. And the poor child, now they have to look at this face, try and interpret what the hell all this information in the face is, as well as listening to the intonation and the actual words and the fact that neurotypicals don't say what they mean. So she's going to say, you know, hop to it or lend me a hand, or some of these things that literally don't make any sense.
A common symptom amongst children with autism can be sudden mood swings, bursts of extreme aggression. And for a child in a mainstream school, frustration could well be made worse by having to act normal.
It does seem to be a real sense of their frustration that, you know, almost as if they're in a glass box and then they can't let you know what's going on.
So I think that the anger and frustration in autism come about, of course, from lack of understanding on both sides. You can see a problem of translation. They can't read our minds, but we're also having difficulty seeing how they view the world. And that frustration that builds up often from problems of communication. And of course, the anxiety and the frustration go hand in hand. When we're really frightened, you know, we can run away or we can fight. And some children with autism are fighting for their lives.
And of course, that's just layering upon layering, the frustration.
Yeah. And what happens often is that poor families get it because the child has been maybe at school and they've been keeping a lid on their behaviour and they've managed to do that act of acting neurotypical and it's cost them hard. They come in through the door and then they explode and the mum gets it all.
I want to take my shoes off. Well, you need to take your shoes off. Now stop swearing. Why can't you take your shoes off? I don't want to. Well, I'll help you. Now, there's no need for that. Jake, put your trousers off. Jake, can you...
When he overloads, and it all gets too much, you know, he'll start lashing out and throwing, screaming, shouting, just trying to make sense of it all.
You're going to get changed, Jake. You're going to get changed. Stop swearing.
That's the difficult bit, to try and hold it together for the rest of the family.
Jake, 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 let go. Jake! Oh! Jake, sit down.
Autism is not an excuse for bad behaviour. You know, we're trying to say that you need to control, if you like. We all have to control a temper. We could all put our fist through a wall from time to time, but, you know, it's how, when and where.
Can you slow him down, though? Do you think he knows that you're trying to understand?
More so. We talk to him, make things simplistic, but he knows everything that's going on, so he's not wound up about them or stressed out. It's a strange area when your son said to you, well, what's going to happen to me when you die? So I said to Jake, well, we have a lovely family. OK, then. But no emotion after anything else. I said, but I'm going to be here for a long time. So that's OK. But there's no real feeling.
Owing to the genes they share, it's now generally accepted that the brothers and sisters of children with autism have a higher risk of having the condition themselves, possibly as high as 18%. Mandy and Jason are now worried that Jake's younger brother Zane is also exhibiting distressing symptoms.
To unwind 5 minutes. No, this is not our room.
Zane has just moved from nursery to a mainstream primary school. According to Mandy, every day he is getting more and more anxious because he has to cope with interacting with lots of new children.
You looking forward to school today? Yeah? No. No? Oh,
I don't want to go.
Tell me why you don't like school.
Because I can't do with all the school.
You can't do with all the school,
No.
okay.
You know, sorts of people then, and I hate the people.
Do you?
Yes.
What do they say to you?
Nothing, but I just don't
You
like
don't
the
like
people.
the people. Okay, okay. Don't get upset. Listen, calm down. Listen. The people want to be your friends.
No, nobody wants to be my friend. That's the truth.
You're sure about that?
Yes.
Have you thought about going up to them and saying, hi, can I play?
No.
You don't think of saying that?
I like
You like what?
doing.
Or why don't you say it to the kids,
No,
Zane?
but-
Can Zane play? Can I play?
I just want to.
So tell me about Zane and when you started to have some worries about his development.
But it was, again, about a 14, 15-month bit where he'd do things that were totally off the wall for no reason, like the banging the head on the floor. His elder brother didn't do that, but he would do it. And there are people that would say, well, let him do it, and then if it hurts, he'll stop. But he didn't stop.
So a much higher pain threshold.
That's right.
A lower sensitivity to pain or heat or cold can be a symptom of autism. Another sign the brain is processing sensory information differently.
3 minutes and coat time, Jane.
And his behaviours were different, very different from his brother's, what he was doing.
Were there any sort of typical autistic type behaviours that you, looking back now, you can think, OK.
Head shaking. A lot of head
Yeah,
shaking.
just
Just really, really
Side to
aggressively shaking the head
side.
from side to side.
But
They both did that, didn't they?
They did both do that, but the eyes were somewhere else when they were doing it.
I'm not coming, Mum. Why not? Can you hold my fish?
Why?
No, I just don't want to. And I hate school.
Sorry. Listen, you could have got run over then, sweetheart. You
Shut
know
up!
this is a main road. And all right, sweetheart, listen.
You blame yourself. You go through a process. Well, what have I done wrong? Why is my child not responding in a typical way that you would expect from what I'm doing?
We like school.
I don't
We do, once we're there. There are lots of children who've got a bit of a tummy wobble. They're a little bit nervous on the first day. But listen, then they make friends and they do lots of good lessons. What do you hate about it, Zane?
I just don't like the people.
The people, well,
It's
is it
too much noisy.
too noisy? OK, well, shall we let them go in? Now, listen.
Mandy and Jason now feel that in order to get the best support and care for Zane, they need to start the difficult process of having him formally diagnosed.
So the diagnosis for Jake opened, I mean, obviously it had its impact, but it opened some doors.
It's the best thing that ever happened to us, personally, because for the family, we knew what it was. You can move on, work with it, move on.
And you had an explanation.
That's right.
And I suppose in some ways, the beginning of an understanding that all of the, I don't know, everything you'd seen in your little boy could be thought about in a different way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
Yeah. That was strange, because we
Yeah.
don't go back there. We never look
No.
back. We go forward. I think Jake's future is more positive than Zane's,
Right.
because we don't know where we're going with Zane and how to support him and what to do to help his future, to reach his full potential. We don't know what his potential is
As yet.
as yet.
I'll give you a hand. I'll give you a hand.
At Birkbeck College in London, scientists are now engaged in the most comprehensive long-term study of the brothers and sisters of children with autism, who, because of their genes, are known to be at higher risk of developing the condition. They are conducting a wide variety of tests to try and discover new clear biomarkers. specific physical differences between autistic and non-autistic children that will make future diagnosis of autism much earlier and easier. One of their studies involves making recordings of the electrical activity of brains in babies as young as 8 months old. The babies are shown various pictures and sounds to test how they respond to any variation.
So what happens here is that we try to bore the brain or habituate it to repeated sounds, and then we expect it, because it gets bored, that when a new sound comes in, they will notice a difference. And what we see in the babies at risk for autism is that they are always alert. So they don't habituate, and that's why when something changes, they don't notice that change as well.
Because they're always in a high state of...
Yeah.
The Birkbeck team have found very subtle differences in the way the babies at higher risk of autism respond to these sounds to those who are not.
So this is giving us a real opportunity to push things right back to the beginning.
Exactly. Wouldn't it be wonderful?
So basically what Kim is trying to do is to prompt Noah to play with her, to connect with her, to maintain eye contact, to focus together on a joint activity. And this is one of the key skills that we think help children develop these amazing set of skills over the first few years of life, and things like language and several other parts of cognition that depend on their ability to learn from other people.
So a way of looking at his behaviour.
Yes, exactly.
Alongside some of the other experiments that you're doing here.
Yes, so it's absolutely critical for our project that when we see some changes at the level of brain development, or we're in these artificial laboratory settings, that we're able to tie this back to something that's actually more real in the child's environment and their relationship with others.
This extraordinary study hopes to run for the next 5 years. It aims to build up the most comprehensive set of data about the siblings of children with autism, and hopefully to come up with a new set of early markers to enable doctors to spot autism, at least in at-risk children, as soon as possible after birth.
This is exactly what makes these studies so powerful, that it's sort of this natural history of the child that we're following.
For the past 8 months, Tony Miller has been spending a few days each month at a publicly funded residential care home, FlexiCare, to allow Lainey time on her own and to see whether it might provide a solution to the problem of Tony's long-term care. Lainey is preparing him for this major change.
Tony? Tony, listening? You want to come and see? No. Tony? Tony, listening? Come over here. Tony? Good boy, good boy. Come here, come and see Mummy. Well done. Let Mummy show you social story. Headphones off. It's good listening. Come round here. Come and have a look. Okay, look at Tony's diary. Okay. Okay, now tomorrow, which is Friday, Tony is going into FlexiCare. So we have blue, Flexi, pink for school, yellow for home. And tomorrow, Tony is going into FlexiCare, yeah, for 8 sleeps. School on Monday, school. And then Tony comes home, looking, home, yeah, on Sunday. Is that good, Tony? Yeah. Tony, listening? You want to see? You want to see? No see. No see? How much of that is registered? I think he's took some in.
No, I think he did.
Yeah, he's done well.
So something different lies ahead.
For me, yes. For all of us, it is. And the dynamics of the family will change. And Tony will change. He's growing up. He's trying to tell me, in his non-communicative world, I don't want you around, Mum. I want my friends, which is normal.
You're all right. Good waiting, Tony.
When he was younger, I was probably just the object to him for whatever he wanted or he needed.
Whoa, and it's crashed. Oh, no, it's crashed.
I really had to work hard with him to get him to that I'm Mum, I am a person. And now he understands. It took a long time, but now he understands. But it's took me 15 years.
Like Mummy showed you, pull a string.
Should I take another look? Who am I?
Good boy, there he goes. Hold your string. Whoa! Run, Tony, run!
It doesn't matter once Tony's placed. If I get killed in a car crash next week, he's fine.
Could you stand another drink? I'm better when I don't think. Seems to get me through. Say,
that's it, keep tugging. Very high, isn't it? It's very high. There you go. Wow. Come on.
You're searching to bring that child back to you, whether it's, you know, emotionally, psychologically. You're having to do it to bring it back, and it does take an awful lot of time.
heard you read another book. Should I
Better.
take another
It's okay, listening. What's the matter? What does Tony want? What does Tony want?
Home.
Home? You want to go home?
Yeah.
Tony finished?
Finish.
Okay, let's get your kite. Get your kite. Wrap it up.
Wrap up.
One more time,
It's the day of Zane Clark's assessment. Mandy and Jason are taking him to Purley in Surrey to see a private clinical psychologist who specialises in diagnosing children with autism. Dr. Amita Shah will spend the day observing Zane and talking with Mandy and Jason about his developmental history. She and the family have agreed that I can observe the process. It is the first time in the UK that it has ever been filmed.
Very nicely. Which one do you think it might be?
Dr. Shah has collected all the previous reports made on Zane by various doctors, paediatricians and his school. She has also viewed all the videos Mandy and Jason have made of his behaviour.
Okay.
She must weigh up all the evidence before she can make a proper diagnosis.
What happened at about a year or so? That's when you first felt.
Yeah.
Oh.
He began to scream and cry a lot.
And could you establish reasons for that?
No.
Or? Has he had a real regression, a setback? You know, did he start talking and then did he stop talking, or did he?
He did it with food.
With food,
I noticed
yeah.
with the way he was eating.
Yeah.
His skills were very, very good from the high chair, from the fingers,
yeah.
progressing with, you know,
Yeah.
the cutlery, and then he seemed to go back and he became very clumsy.
Oh, interesting. What age did he go clumsy?
About 14 months on.
Where do you live?
I live in England.
In England, but what place in England? Do you know?
I think I live in West Park Way. That's a very nice place. Very nice place? Yeah,
Ah.
I'm in my house sometimes. I get spiders in there.
Dr. Shah's assessment is based on the internationally accepted diagnostic interview for social and communication disorders. A specially designed informal interview that helps her build a detailed picture of Zane's abilities, problems and atypical behaviour from birth till now.
Oh, it's going to come back to me, is it?
She will also make direct observations of Zane's behaviour both as he plays and performs various specialised tasks.
You've seen him, haven't you, Levin? What situation did you see him over the summer?
He was on the climbing frame. And I think from a distance it looked like he was playing with the other children, but actually he was chattering away to himself or ordering them around. From a distance it looks as if he's playing alongside and, you know, interacting, but
so
get a
when
bit
you look
closer.
closely,
You hear him talking.
And you hear him talking.
And you hear him telling other children what to do.
Dr. Shah is trying to assess whether Zayn's behaviour falls on the autistic spectrum. She needs to be sure that this isn't related to other problems in his life. She's looking for anything that suggests impairment of social interaction, language and imagination.
Okay. Are you warm? Warm enough? Oh, hello? You're running away? Zayn? What's he like generally at home? Can he get quite moody? Do his moods go up and down? Is it? Yeah.
At the drop of a hat, it would just kick off. You can kick off and...
I know it sounds really strange, but it's almost like he gets depressed. It's very strange. And he said, Bear's going to die. And he'll cry, real tears, real...
Well, is this just out of the blue?
Out of the blue. Nothing will console him until he comes out of this low, really low mood in his own time.
At the end of the day, after she has spent several hours talking to Mandy and Jason and observing Zayn, Dr. Shah is now ready to make her diagnosis.
Okay, Mandy and Jason, I'm now going to give you some feedback from what the assessment has shown us. So it's not just based on today, but as you know, I've had a lot of reports beforehand from the pediatrician. I've seen those DVDs, the films of Zayn, all those questions we asked you this morning, and then, of course, meeting Zayn himself has made it all very clear to us. You know, all his early behaviours and what he's functioning now shows clearly that he is on the autistic spectrum. And he fits into the subgroup of children who have Asperger's syndrome because of the quality of his social interaction. But what he is showing is very high intelligence, and he's showing a lot of very normal sociability as well, which is very positive. And the difficulties are to do with his own frustrations, because he is extremely intelligent. There are lots of people who have very satisfying lives and have a career and so on. But the important thing is that with someone like Zayn, you know, the emotions are a little bit disarranged, and he can become anxious, he can become stressed. That's what we have to bear in mind and actually make sure that life is arranged for him in such a way. So I think that's it's time for you to maybe. Do you want some time just to take it in, and then maybe we can have another chat in a few minutes, or just it's a lot, isn't it? And it's like.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Zayn has been diagnosed with autism and having Asperger's syndrome. This means that although his cognitive and linguistic skills are relatively well developed, he'll have significant difficulties in social interactions.
I was trying to hang on to not being emotional, I suppose, just having something clarified. I was trying to hang on to keeping it all together, really, you know, thinking, this is it.
It was emotional, it wasn't emotional.
It was really emotional. Yeah. It's a long, exhausting road to get here.
Yeah. And it's the beginning of something as well, isn't it?
There might be a chance that everything will be typical in his world.
Yeah. So it's time to move on with Zayn, who I think has had this day
devoted to him.
Has he even known?
The attention's been amazing for him, he's loved it.
But thank you. I mean, I do feel, you know, there I was sitting on the edge of it, not going through it with you, but, you know, having my own emotional response to it. But I'm very pleased that we have some answers.
Thank you.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you.
Go now. I'm all right now.
Sure.
I'm all right till she thinks she has a way. The man has a way.
If you include the wider families, autism affects the lives of over 2 million people in the UK every day. At its most severe, it is a serious, lifelong and disabling condition. Its effects are often hidden, and without the right care, it can have profound, sometimes devastating effects on individuals and their families. But for others like Michael and Zayn, autism needn't be a barrier to living a full life, just a different way of experiencing the world that we are only just beginning to understand and appreciate.
Where's the future going for Tony?
The future for Tony now is residential care. We've had to choose it because with puberty the behaviours become really quite challenging. Well, I need to let Tony go so he can learn and progress because all our children leave home. It's a natural process. With Tony, I knew from the age of 2 he was going to end up in residential care. So it was very accepting. And I always said that the day it became too much, that it became too challenging and it became unmanageable, I would really have to think about putting him into residential. So it was a huge, huge decision.
Wow, he's got his new house.
What struck me was how peaceful and serene it is here. You know, someone like Tony can come out and jump and flap and scream for England, and the only people that are going to hear him are the cows. And it's just so good. It's, you know, you've got this home here, which is a 4-bedded bungalow, and Tony will be living with 3 other young people here in the same age bracket. Over there you've got an education centre, and in there they've got a lovely sensory room. They've got a kitchen where they'll be teaching Tony life skills and how to make sandwiches and just be really independent of me. Mummy loves you. I see you in 8 days.
No. Oh, no.
I know he's happy, this is the right thing, and there's a lot of adjustment to be doing for Tony and for me, but this is the right thing to do. Really happy, I'm really happy. He's starting a new phase in his life now, and so are we. That's good. I'm really pleased for him.
Jake is still at a mainstream school. With Dr. Shah's advice, Mandy and Jason can now start to arrange more care and support for his brother Zayn. Michael Barton is planning another book about autism and is hoping to find a job using his physics degree when he leaves university. Autism is still an incredibly puzzling disorder of the brain, but over the last 50 years, we've started to unlock some of the meaning behind the more bizarre behaviours and symptoms. And we are beginning to understand what happens in the brain as we process all of the sensory information in the world around us, and to comprehend how this affects the way that children think, act, and grow into social beings. To learn more about autism and to separate fact from fiction, go to bbc.co.uk/growing children and follow the links to the Open University.
For details of organisations which offer advice and support, go online to bbc.co.uk/actionline or call the BBC Action Line to hear recorded information on 08000 560 780. Lines are open 24 hours and are free from a landline. Mobile operators will charge.